can read a play, but to see a play performed is when you really can appreciate it. It was the most marvelous production.
Thank you so much.
Really enjoyed it. I want to ask you sort of a background question.
Sure.
And at moments like this, I wish I were part of the Department of Sociology and Criminal Justice, because I'm not, but I do teach some courses on women in the law. What was your background in doing this? Had you read about some specific cases of infanticide that led you to this creative process?
Well, in the 90s, I was writing some plays about criminal justice, and those of you who are kind of an age in the 90s remember that there was some kind of rather horrific and very spectacular cases of infanticide, including Andrea Yates and Melissa Drexler and Amy Grossberg. And there was an article by Steven Pinker, the neuroscientist, called "Why Do They Kill Their Children?" And that article just kind of got me thinking about not only about these acts, but also mothering in our time. So that kind of got me going.
Well, in this particular situation here, the line that really struck with me was I did the best I could. And I'd like you to comment on that, because there was that similarity between Evelyn and Miss Rita. Evelyn was kind of saying that, Miss Rita said that specifically, and very much the part that if it had been a different time, Miss Rita could have been the one that was subject to the criminal action. So I thought maybe you could comment on that a little bit.
I guess, but for the grace of God was my thinking about that. And I was thinking a lot about the research of Michelle Oberman and Cheryl Myers, and how they kind of revealed to me the notion that motherhood takes place in a context that is, and various pressures are brought to bear, economic, social, and cultural pressures that complicate the process of mothering. And I guess my theme or my thesis or my premise in this play is that the people who pass judgment, whether we're passing judgment on our own parents, or whether people are passing judgment in a court of law, don't really adequately consider all these things that complicate mothering. So I kind of structured the play to reveal that, I hope, and presented two examples of where we saw people struggling to parent in limited circumstances, and see how fragile it is, how easily things can fall apart. There was a couple of cases that I read about where Christine Amaker didn't have a crib for her baby and was sleeping with all of her children, and she was convicted of manslaughter. She served some time, and eventually it was appealed. And that's how I see that this will happen. In my thinking, Evelyn will serve some time and probably on appeal will be released. But 2 years out of the life of a person that's struggling economically, you lose your housing, you lose your job, you might lose your kids. So then they come back on the street. They're still of childbearing years. They might get their kids back. Where is society served? So that's what I was hoping to kind of illustrate.
I think you very much did so. Do you think that, I think the fact that Evelyn had her 2 beers that night and maybe 1 or 2 cigarettes was a very significant part of the plot. Do you think that if she had not had a drink, because having a drink while you're a new mother is something that you're not supposed to do, particularly when you're breastfeeding. Some of you may have seen the brouhaha on the web recently because some TV personality is pregnant and is drinking, and there are a lot of chat rooms open about how can you be pregnant and drink. So is that a significant factor to you? That she was failing what society saw as the role of the behavior of the mother?
Well, I wanted her, I made her an unlikable character in many ways because I didn't want it to be easy to forgive her. Because most of these people that end up in jail, they have something that, juries find repellent. Oftentimes, whether or not they drink or have an addiction or they, pick at their eyelashes or they're racist. So the fact that she was drinking, I think, really is significant. And as the public defender who worked with me on this play said, all of her clients say they had 2 beers. And they never say they had 1 beer or 3 beers or 4 beers. That's the standard issue. It's probably what some people say to their parents. I just had 2 beers. And I think she had more than 2 beers. I think she probably has a substance abuse problem. And, in Myers and Oberman's research, when they looked at the profile of women that are involved in the death of a child when it had to do with neglect, I say close to 95% of them had either substance abuse or alcohol problems. So I decided to include that because that really does fall into the area of neglect. It really does, especially when you're sleeping with a child and 3 kids on with 3 people on a single bed. That could be construed as falling into an area of neglect. So I wanted to create that tension.
Well, talking about neglect, I mean, from my point of view, Evelyn was a little bit neglectful, but there was someone else very neglectful in here, and I didn't see them having enough responsibility. And I'm not a criminal lawyer, I'm a civilist, I teach civil law, and I'm thinking in terms of negligence, my students sitting out there, negligence. Wasn't the state complicit? Wasn't the state negligent? Shouldn't they bear some serious responsibility because they were sleeping in one bed, but that was not her fault, though she didn't follow up. I did catch that. But basically, could you comment some more about it?
Well, I guess I feel as though, it would be helpful if we could all kind of take a little of the blame, because obviously it wasn't one thing. It's like a big pileup, as Vincent says, it's a pileup nightmare. And I think absolutely that social services is so overwhelmed and overburdened, and we don't fund it enough, so these people are running from pillar to post trying to help all these people that need resources, so things really do slip through the cracks. There's evidence to show that, where in other countries where there's more maternal support, infanticide is not quite as prevalent, and neglect and abuse. So I would say yes, there's some concern that I have and other scholars have that we really don't have enough services in place for people that are fragile mothers, and she clearly is fragile.
Well, in this case, it does seem to be a case of accident. I think everybody's convinced at the end that she didn't intentionally kill her child. But there's a lot of discussion, and you and I have discussed the fact that in the United States, there isn't a sufficient defense for a new mother who intentionally kills her child, but that is because she is subjected to all the hormonal changes. And you and I discussed the fact that in other jurisdictions, in other countries, there are some special laws. I wonder if you could comment on that.
Yes, I think 11 of the developed countries, not ours, have comprehensive countrywide legislations that asks courts to consider the very particular pressures that a mother undergoes physiologically and psychologically when they are pregnant, when they're lactating, and I think in the first year of the parent's birth, the child's birth. I think it's called the Infanticide Act of 1938 in Britain. Is a very famous code that is used to get women removed from the conviction of from murder and bring it to manslaughter automatically.
Which is why I wonder why she would be convicted of manslaughter when there was no intention whatsoever. But did you know that there are some laws that are proposed? I always found an article about a proposed law in Texas to bring that consideration into the United States.
Everyone kind of expects that mothers have this, that their mother love is inviolable. That it's just like this sturdy commodity that exists no matter what. And as you all know, students and everybody, our love, our generosity, our blessed qualities are permeable by stress, by lack, by people judging us, wanting to hide, all of those things. So mothers are like fathers, like kids. We're like people, I think. And we have our good days and our bad days. And, but that's a very good point. Most of us expect mothers to have a lot of love, and we do our best.
And on that note, I think the time is up. It's 1:45, so I want to ask everybody to join in thanking the actors.